All right. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Welcome.
Thanks for having me.
Welcome to the great podcast, man. Thanks for being on. Thanks for having us at your place.
Of course. Glad to have you guys in.
This is just a test, by the way.
I'm like, wow, I'm killing it. So.
That's actually going to be our intro, by the way.
Oh, that worked out really well.
No, seriously, thanks for having us on. Welcome to the great podcast. Everyone, this is Cory. He is a fantastic musician, plays for several different bands. We'll get into all of the questions, all the different things. But have you ever been on a podcast before?
I was actually on one other local podcast called the Earspace Podcast with Byron Morrison. We went to high school together. So I was on his podcast a few years back.
Okay.
Yeah.
This isn't, so the great podcast is not a official, this isn't the Jimmy Fallon show. This is going to be just a conversation between the two of us. Just kind of get to know each other, have just good give and take, things like that. So yeah. I think my viewers would love to learn a little bit more about the music scene, and also kind of hear from someone that is super involved with it here in Lancaster, all around. So, yeah, thanks again for allowing us to do this interview.
Yeah, of course.
First question that I kind of wanted to ask you was, what started the whole, you know what, I like it, I'm good at it, and I'm going to do it. What kind of started that drive of being a musician? Because you play different instruments, things like that. But what started that initial drive for you?
Yeah, I feel like from a very young age, I always wanted to be in a band, but I was never good at any instruments.
Really?
If I'm being honest.
Really?
Yeah. So when I was growing up, really early on in New Jersey, I remember my dad would just always have classic rock radio on. So I didn't know what was kind of playing, but I kind of just had this sense of wow, this just makes me feel so good. I just want to be able to make noise like this, make sounds like this,
That's awesome.
And I remember I tried guitar. I was terrible at it. I tried trumpet. I was terrible at it. I even tried clarinet. I was like, well, maybe I got to go woodwinds. Terrible at it. I was really bad. But even though so even from all that, my mom still has this this big sunflower thing that's on their office wall in the room. It's tucked behind the door, so you can't see it until you're in that office. But basically in I think it was second or third grade, everybody wrote down what they wanted to be when they grew up. Some people or even just a wish. It was your springtime wish. Some people were I want a new Power Ranger. Some people
that would have been me.
Some people were I want to be a firefighter. I was just I want to play in a band. That was my thing. And I didn't even play instruments well at that time. I was making noise with the kind of cheap instruments I had, but I was not very good at it. I literally had bands and assigned people be okay, you're gonna be the drummer, I'm gonna play guitar, this guy's gonna play bass. None of those people played any of those instruments.
Really?
But from a very young age, I was I want to do this. But when we moved to Pennsylvania, I actually I told my parents that I wanted to take drum lessons, and they immediately said no, because they're like, okay, so you played all these other instruments and you didn't stick with them, and now you want the loudest instrument of all.
Yeah.
So the deal was with my parents was that I took lessons for a year or a little bit more with a practice pad, and then after that they would consider buying me a drum set. So yeah, and honestly, it was probably the best thing for me, because at the time I didn't have anything else that I really wanted. So it was something to work towards. It was really the first thing that I remember actually working for, sitting on the pad. I'm this sucks, but but it'll be worth it.
Hearing the same noise.
It'll be worth it. I'm this is all going to come together somehow. And it really worked out, I think, because I think that kind of journey has helped me with not only being a musician, but teaching lessons too.
That's awesome. Yeah. And your initial start, you will never forget.
Oh yeah,
that initial drive that pushed you to do it, which I think that's amazing. So just straight up with you, I suck at any instrument. I can't sing a lick. I am terrible when it comes to any of that stuff. I used to sing to start each podcast, and then I realized, one, I'm going to get demonetized, but two, I'm not good at this. And I did have someone say, you should probably stick to doing that when you're home alone.
In the show.
So, yeah. So when I see someone who is super talented, for one, playing instruments or even being able to do multiple different things in the music scene, I'm just in awe. Because that's something that, like I was a big sports guy growing up. I gave speeches in front of, biggest speech I gave was in front of like 1,000 people. Like I got to do all these different things but one thing I was never able to actually like grab onto was music. It was one thing that I just couldn't do. So
Yeah.
I have a lot of respect for being able to, because it takes a lot of discipline. It has to.
Yeah, it is really like learning another language.
Yeah.
Like because people can enjoy it. You know, people can like really like. I feel like that's the cool thing about music is like universally, even if you're not necessarily like good at playing it, everybody can enjoy music, and that's like almost like a personality trait of people at some point. You know, like okay, what do you do for a living? Like, what do you like to do in your free time? What kind of music do you listen to? Everybody across the board likes that, which is pretty awesome. And yeah, I appreciate you, taking into. Well, I appreciate you appreciating the music too. Yeah,
absolutely. So, speaking on instruments, do you have a favorite instrument that you play or that you wish you played? Do you have?
In all honesty, like it kind of goes in waves.
Okay.
Like, obviously, like drums are where my heart is. Like that's where I feel most comfortable for sure. Like if I'm jamming with any band, I don't really want to be on any other instrument other than drums because I feel like I can go for hours playing drums. But I definitely go in waves. Like, especially over the pandemic, like I didn't really play drums all that much. Mm-hmm. Like I was like, we were writing and stuff with my band Sun Not Yellow. So I was practicing for that stuff, but for the most part I was like writing songs. I was just kind of like, it was the first time because we had just gotten our new space when like about a month or two before the pandemic hit. So it was the first time I could really like just like turn up and be loud and like sing and like just crank my amp, just like be as like obnoxiously loud as I want and not have to worry.
As possible.
Yeah, well, because before that space I was literally in my parents' basement. So like I'd be like, okay, well I got like about an hour before Dad gets home. I do not want my dad to hear what I'm working on. So I'll be like, what is that? Like, because you get experimental, you get a little weird.
So I did want to. So your profile picture, which will pop up on the screen, it's you playing the drums. I believe it's your Instagram picture, and it's like so emotional. Like your emotions, you can feel it through that picture. To where a lot of drummers, when they're in the zone, they like every what do they call it when you are every note that you're hitting, like you can feel it. You can absolutely feel the emotion that they have and how like their rhythm. And like in your picture, you can literally see that.
Yeah.
So do you find yourself when you're playing like on the drums, for instance, just getting so lost sometimes in just that rhythm to where like you just like you're showing it to where like it's extreme throughout your body, like just how does that come about?
Yeah, it's definitely like an experience. I feel like for me, it's definitely I wouldn't say I get lost in the moment. It's almost like I just get overtaken by it, like overwhelmed, like because in all honesty, like whether we're playing like a packed room or to nobody, I kind of tune out everything else, and I just really focus on like what the guys on stage with me are doing. Especially like, from like the bass and guitar area, just kind of like making sure that like I'm holding down whatever is going on, because I feel like for a lot of my bands, like we have the template of the song. We know exactly how the song's going to go. There's a song structure, there's verses, choruses, and other parts. But for the most part, like within those sections, like we are not necessarily improvising within those sections, but every time we go to those sections, they're a little bit different. Gotcha. So I feel like for me, it's kind of just making sure that like I'm aware enough to play off those moments, but also kind of like, I guess like lucid enough as well to kind of like let things happen as they come. Like I tell my students all the time, I'm like, sometimes you just have to go for it. Like the worst case scenario is, it doesn't come out exactly how you planned. But the worst thing that you can do also is like, hesitate. For me, it's about like, just really playing into those moments and making the most of that, because I always think about it like you've got to play your show that you're playing right then like it's your last show. Like you could have 10 dates booked after that, but you just don't know what's going to happen. So it's kind of making the most of every moment.
So it's your dream.
Oh yeah.
To do this, obviously.
Oh, yeah.
You've said that before. To be able to do it, and you do this full time.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
To be able to do that full time. Now, I've said this before on the podcast that if you can do something you love, there's no better way of living.
Oh yeah, for sure.
By doing something you love, and just, I mean, so you saying this, like, that could be my last show at any moment, things like that. People that come and watch you and listen to your bands play, you giving them the best performance each time is a gift for them in its own right, because music is tough to get into and to stay in. I mean, anything live performance, anything with being a performer altogether. I mean, I started this podcast a couple months ago, and it's hard for me to stay with it because I'm like, oh, I'm running out of content. I don't know. Like, and that's just a podcast. Like, you're doing this with other guys, you're doing this with other members, and I can't imagine being able to keep that same rhythm, keep going, keep the train moving kind of thing. So I have a lot of respect for you and for what you're able to do and follow your dream. But you did touch on that you do have students. And so when you're first, how did you get into being a teacher? And second, on top of that, have you had any students where you're like, well, this person is like possibly next level?
Yeah. So I was in college. I went to Lebanon Valley College for recording and also music performance. So for me, it was kind of like I knew from a very early age that, like, once I started taking lessons and really getting into the thick of it, like, obviously when I first started, everything kind of like comes a little slower, whatever. And as I progressed, I realized I'm like, like, this guy's making a living off of teaching me drums. Like, I think I would love to do that. Yeah. So, and once I kind of realized that, probably like mid high school, I was like, if I take this seriously and like I want to do this, like I feel like I can do this, because I was just like, it might be a slow start, but I knew at the time that my parents were super supportive. They still are. Without them, I probably wouldn't have been able to, like, have a solid foundation to even, do things like this. But I remember that when I was at college, like, I was going for recording, I was going for performance, but I always had like the intention of graduating and teaching lessons, mainly because I knew that that was a good way to facilitate money. Yeah. And it was a flexible schedule. So I was just like, if I can, like, get a pretty solid roster. At the time I was thinking, like, even like 5 to 10 students, like, just to facilitate any kind of rent or utilities that I would have, that would be enough to kind of sustain myself. But it kind of turned into something a lot more. And luckily, like, I had the opportunity to work at a drum shop called Drums, XII, where I got probably about half my students via them, and then half students via myself, or just recommendations, word of mouth. And then right as the pandemic, well, actually, it was right before the pandemic, we kind of just like caught wind that they were going to downsize, and there were a lot of drum teachers there. So like we were kind of like, my business partner, Brian, and I were kind of just in a situation where we were like, well, we either stay and hope that, like, we make the cut of the drum teachers they want to keep, or we kind of just try to do something on our own. And it's really a lot easier. Like, it's really a lot easier to do anything when you're with somebody else or you're a part of a team. Absolutely. Like, it's definitely a different dynamic. Like, it almost becomes like a family dynamic. Like, you have to have it's a different relationship, when you go into business with somebody, or if you start a band with somebody. So Brian and I actually, like, for months were like searching for a space, found this one. It needed a lot of work. So we ended up like renting it for a few months, where we were not making any extra income because we were literally just trying to fix up the space, because the space that we're in is kind of like a warehouse. Gotcha. Very much is a warehouse, So we had to like make it a little bit more presentable, get the cigarette smell out of it, all that kind of stuff. But once we kind of got the business kind of on its feet, we started teaching here in I guess January of 2020, and then 3 months later, March came and COVID happened.
Yeah.
So, but luckily we had the space because Brian has his own house, so he was able to teach out of his house. And fortunately for me, like I was able to teach out of here because at the time I just moved into Lancaster City in a small apartment, so like couldn't teach lessons out of there.
Yeah.
So I got really lucky, and then also on top of that, like our bands were able to continue practicing because we had a space.
Gotcha.
You know, before we were kind of going back and forth to each other's house, but to kind of have a space where we were all like, you know, I guess everyone said your quarantine. You know, even if we were rehearsing with masks on, like it was a big difference rather than like, you know, just sitting in our house. Because I mean, everybody can kind of relate to being like that first. Like, I'd even say like 6 to 9 months where everyone's kind of just like, so what do I do with all this time? You know?
Well, plus having your own space makes it that much more real.
Oh yeah,
as well. But if I had my own studio to do a podcast, I'd be like, all right, maybe I should start doing this full time.
Yeah.
Right now, my space is in my basement. So
what? Basement's where it all started.
Yeah, that's right.
That's where Apple started.
Yeah, exactly.
Small garage.
Exactly.
But they don't have basements in California. I'm not sure if that's true or not. Don't hold it. But yeah, so I think the lessons just kind of like were able to facilitate me to be able to play these gigs because I was like, especially in college, like we started playing gigs like a good bit. So when you know, it came to doing stuff after school, I was just like, this is the best way for me to make money while also playing gigs that don't necessarily bring in a lot of money because like it's one of those things like you work up to it. Like now when we play in Lancaster, like everybody in our band gets paid, you know, pretty well. You know, enough to be like, okay, cool, like it's worth it for me to like take off the shift or get off early, like things like that.
Yeah.
When you play in new cities, it's a little bit harder, just because like, you know, like you have to make sure that you have like locals and stuff and, you know, just a good draw. And when you're playing in a new city, like you have no draw.
Yeah.
So, but when you have like a solid job that's flexible, and you can take off for a week or two and come back and still have like whether a roster of students or just a job that will welcome you back in and let you have those 2 weeks off, like it makes a big difference.
Absolutely. So, I know we're going to take a break here in a second, but before we do, I do want to touch on eventually your bands and you're going on tour here. So I do want to touch on all that after the break. But before that, what for anyone listening that is thinking about joining or in a band and in that in between of, do I put more time and effort and money into this full time or even more than what I have, or do I just kind of hang it up? What is your advice to someone like that?
I guess my biggest advice is you get what you give. You get what you put into it. You know, the more time and sometimes money, you know, I think kind of just depends where you invest that money. But the more effort you put into something, the more you're going to get out of it, whether that's monetarily or just, you know, for yourself personally. Like it's definitely gotten to the point where I've been doing music for years and we're just starting to get to the point where we're actually investing into ourselves, mainly because when you're in a band and you go on tour and you don't have a band fund, like that sucks. But like there are like steps to that. So it's like taking a band seriously when you get paid, you know, $300 and there are 3 of you. Don't give all the money to the band. Be like, all right, let's like divvy it up. Everybody takes 50, put 50 in the band fund. So little things like that where it's just like kind of putting the effort into making it like, you know, a viable functioning thing. And once the band gets functioning on its own, where you have a band fund and like you have like the presence where people are reaching out to you just as much as you're reaching out to people for gigs, like it definitely becomes a lot easier. But I'd say the biggest thing is like the amount of effort that you put into it will be the you know, the rewards that you sow from it.
Absolutely. All right. Well, we're going to take a brief break. We will be right back after this. are back. So now the next part I wanted to get into was my voice just went like really high. I know. We're back. The next piece I wanted to touch on is, and I'm starting to vibe a little bit more. Finally, takes time. Just like playing
time.
music. Yeah. Something I wanted to ask you is obviously your bands. For those who don't know who you are, or don't know which bands, how many bands are you in, and what's like the names of them for everyone listening?
Yeah. So I kind of associate myself with three main bands. I'm also like a freelance musician, so I play with random artists all the time. But the three main bands are I play drums in Sun Not Yellow.
Okay.
That's a Lancaster / Philly based band. And then the next one I play bass in a post-punk band called Northern Gloom. And that's also kind of like scattered throughout central PA. We practice in Lancaster, but drummers from like Philly suburbs and guitar players from Harrisburg. And then the third band is a band that I sing and play guitar in, and that's Whose Hands Are These? And again, kind of Lancaster / Philly suburbs based. But yeah, I was saying a little bit to you when we met up today. It was kind of like before the pandemic, I was all over the place. So if you would ask me that question, I'm like, oh well, this band, this band, this band, this band, this band. And but since I had some time to like kind of reset myself, I kind of like formulated it into like three bands that kind of like get my fix as far as guitar, drums, bass, and all that kind of stuff. So I associate with those bands, but again, like I'm a hired gun for a lot of people too, which is great because Lancaster is definitely a music scene that kind of like nurtures that a lot. You can, if you really want to be a musician in Lancaster, it's not a very big pond, but it's a big enough market as far as like people who want to see music. Like people around the community love live music, so there's definitely like a lot of spots to play. If you have like a Thursday night, like we play regularly on Thursdays,
nice.
and like, sometimes Sundays, like there's like a show at Zootropolis this Sunday, you know what I mean? Like stuff like that. Like Lancaster definitely has like a pretty great scene for it. So it's good. And also because we're like close to everything here. So whether you're meeting up with everybody or, going to a major city like Baltimore and Philadelphia are an hour and a half away, Pittsburgh and New York are only like 3 hours away. You know what I mean? Like everything's very manageable from Lancaster, so it's a good spot to be.
So, what band are you going on tour with?
So this summer in July, I'm going on tour with Northern Gloom.
Okay.
And then in August, I'm going on tour with Sun Not Yellow.
Oh, great. Okay.
Yeah.
So Northern Gloom, and even Sun Not Yellow. What is it like getting ready for tour? And just that whole process, because from the outside looking in, when you hear, oh, this band's going on tour, cool, let me see if I can get tickets in this area. Like that's kind of, obviously that's what like the audience, the fans are looking to do. But when you're on your side of it, that's like all mystery. Like what's the process of getting ready to go on tour? What's the things that you have to check off the list, and what's that like? Yeah,
for sure. So with Northern Gloom and Sun Not Yellow, we kind of go about it a little bit differently, but the kind of hit points are about the same. So with Northern Gloom, the guitar player Michael Stipe, he did a lot of the tour booking as far as like the major cities. Like we discussed where we wanted to go. But we kind of also had in mind places that we needed to go as far as like, we have friends in a lot of different cities. So we're like, it makes a lot more sense to go to those places where we have friends, mainly because one, you have a place to stay. Two, you have a connection to someone to tell you what venues are good, what local bands are good. So as far as that tour went, like, Michael booked a lot of it, and then we helped with a lot of like the locals and stuff like that. And then for Sun Not Yellow, it's a little bit different because like, as far as like I'm concerned and our booking agent is concerned, like we're looking for those venues, like trying to find the house shows, trying to find like the bars that'll actually like take a band like us in, because like if you go, like if all the bars that you've heard of in Chicago are probably not going to take a band that they've never seen or heard of, you know what I mean? So you got to find like those more, not necessarily DIY spots, but like, the coffee shops that also throw shows, or like the venue that is also like just a bar, you know what I mean?
Gotcha.
So the biggest thing for touring that I found is, getting a space that suits the size of the crowd that you're going to be in. Because if you do get one of those bigger bars on a Wednesday or Thursday night, great. But like, are you going to be able to fill the room?
Yeah.
I'd rather play to a smaller room of 20 people than a bigger room of 20 people.
Yeah.
But the big thing that I found over time is really just making sure that you book things far enough in advance. Like, we've been working on these tours since probably like February, January,
wow.
February.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay.
And honestly, sometimes people are gonna be like, "Yo, you reached out too soon.
Yeah.
Hit us up in May or whatever."
Gotcha.
But the biggest thing is starting early and also making sure that you have locals on board. Because as I was saying before, like, you can go to a new city, that's awesome and stuff, but you really got to make sure that you have local bands that are actively playing still and that aren't playing around the time that you're coming through. You know, if you go to Chicago and that band that you're playing with in Chicago played the week before, pretty good chance all their fans that usually come out already came out to that show the week before. So it's kind of that, and that's goes back to, like, you know, planning ahead. I think that that's the one thing that I've learned with being like a full-time musician and just having all the moving parts is that the farther in advance you plan ahead, the more likely it's going to happen. Like, I joke all the time. I'm like, that's like my favorite thing in the world, to plan something like a year in advance, and then you're in it and you're doing it, and you're like, holy crap, what's happening? You know what I mean? Like, that's like the most satisfying feeling. You're like, remember when we were talking about this like years ago, like a couple months ago, Whose Hands Are These went down to North Carolina. And I remember, like, I told Caden and he's our bass player, and our drummer Alex, I was like, book this weekend out in March.
Okay, so we had a little bit of technical difficulties. Let's go back like a couple seconds of what you were saying, but you were just talking about the process of touring and things like that. So
we were talking about basically just planning ahead, and I feel like you could probably agree with this. Like, the further in advance you have it in your calendar, the easier it is to like work around with your family, with all of your other activities and all that kind of stuff. So, like, for example, like, we just picked this random weekend in March, and I just knew that it was like the one weekend that everybody in the band at that time, Whose Hands Are These, didn't have anything going on. And I remember, like, probably about 2 months until the gig, so it's probably like January. And my drummer Alex like hits me up, goes like, "Hey man, did you ever like book those dates? Like, is that still happening?" And I remember being like,
"Oh, no way."
So, but again, it was 2 months out. So like, I had him book the weekend, and we pretty much had like, we knew where we wanted to go. So I was just like, you know, like, I pretty much went in a 6-hour radius. So I was like, 6 hours is the most I want to drive. And I just went like, I've never played in Raleigh, so I just started going to town. I just reached out to a bunch of locals. I asked them like what the venues were. If a local band couldn't play or didn't have that date available, I'd be like, "Yo, do you have any suggestions for other local bands or a venue that I could do?" Venue got solidified, and then we had 2 amazing local bands that we played with, and it was bonkers. You know, awesome. We drove down on a Friday, so it was a little rough because like we drove down 6 hours on one Friday and then played the gig, and then we went back up to Richmond for that Saturday gig, which the venue ended up falling through at the last second. So then I was just like, holy crap, like, now we have to, but luckily we already had the bill. So like, I was just like, I basically just then had to we ended up playing at like a brewery. I was just like, "Hey, do you guys have any events going on this Saturday?" They're like, "No, we had played there with a previous band." So I was just like, "Yo, can we play the show?" It kind of venue fell through, but we have all these bands. And it ended up working out. But it's kind of like working those kind of things out, because for a lot of people, you know, it's even playing in bands, like, other people in the bands have 9 to 5. Like, it doesn't always work out where, you know, someone can just be like, "Yeah, I can get off on a Friday." But again, if you plan like 2 months in advance, like, everybody had already put in to take off on those Fridays and Saturdays if they work, you know. So I think just planning in advance is like the biggest thing that I've learned over the last couple of years.
So you've played in, it sounds like, a bunch of different places. You said you're going to Chicago, North Carolina, Virginia, then Richmond. Obviously here in Lancaster, Philly area. Did you go out west, Pittsburgh?
Yeah, we've been to Pittsburgh. Okay. Pittsburgh, Ohio, hitting all those cities on the way to Chicago. New York. We've done New York City with Sun Not Yellow once or twice, and same with Whose Hands Are These, and North and Gloom has played like here and there. But New York City is like hard to get into because again, especially like that city, like, you got to book it. It's not like Nashville, but it's like Nashville in the same way that you have to be like if you want to book now, like it's May, like you should be planning for September.
Well, that was going to be my next question. How about Nashville? Have you ever had a chance to play
Yeah,
there?
so we played so Sun Not Yellow right before the pandemic went on a very long tour. So there's this festival called South by Southwest that happens in March. And it's a lot of bands that are kind of about our size, our same kind of draw, going down to Texas for that big festival that happens over the course of like a long weekend. But basically our goal was just to tour and avoid that. Mainly because we didn't get on to South by Southwest.
Okay.
So we're like, well, if we do tour in March, then we're going to be out of luck because all these bands that are about the same size are going to be doing the same route down.
Yeah.
So our goal, I think we kind of decided this at the end of like the summer of 2019. We're like, okay, we're going to tour late January into February and miss all the hubbub of South by Southwest. Yeah. And it ended up being great because a lot of the venues that we played or were playing were more so booked up for March and late February. Yeah. And we got really lucky because we literally, I think that tour we went from New York. We went and played Raleigh, I think, Atlanta. We did New Orleans. We went to Texas. Like we did a 2-week. It was the longest tour I'd ever been on, and we went all the way to the east side of Texas. Wow. Now you think Texas, like, oh my God, Texas is so big. Most of the cities that you want to hit at least on this side are like on the east side. So you go into Texas and you just go up. You're really sick. But on that tour, we hit Nashville, and it ended up being a really, really good show. It was like, we were kind of like what seemed to be the outskirts of Nashville. We got to go into the city and kind of experience everything. But we were like on the outskirts at this dive bar. And at first we're kind of just like, what the heck is this? Like, I'm not even kidding you. They had like a pet possum there. Like, we're like, yo, there's like there's like food out here. Like, there's like, why is there like dog food out here? They're like, oh, that's for our pet possum. We're like sitting there just like, holy crap. Like, where are we? And they had like, we go to like the bookstore, and it's like a bookstore / like CBD joints and stuff like this. Like, it was like really, really cool. And we're like, it was just like a totally different vibe. And even like the thrift shops were like different. Like, it was just a really interesting spot. But we ended up playing this dive bar that didn't look anything like you would see in Nashville. It was kind of looked like, like one of like the taverns you find on the outskirts of Pennsylvania. But it ended up being like a bonkers show.
That's awesome.
And it was great. Yeah. But again, I think the only reason that the show ended up being so well attended was because all the bands that we were playing with were Nashville bands, and they didn't play at all that month yet. So even though it was like a Wednesday or Thursday, it still ended up being a great show at some like random dive bar. Yeah, awesome.
We went to Nashville a couple years ago with friends, my soon-to-be wife and I, and that whole scene is just so cool. Just the whole music scene in itself. It didn't matter which bar you went to, which restaurant. I mean, we went into this one. It was like a grocery store
/ venue,
and they were still playing. And they were playing behind checkout, and I thought that was the coolest thing because like you had people that, and it's smart. You had people that were going to check out, and they were like, let's kind of stand here a little bit. And then they're like, oh, I want to get a drink. And then they go check out again. Oh, let me get something to eat. Oh, I'll go check out again. And it was just a revolving door. And I probably made up at least 50% of their sales that day because I was just like, this is amazing. Yeah. Oh, look, Twizzlers. So, yeah, that whole scene is really cool. But continuing with touring, things like that, what is your favorite part about touring? And then what's that one part that you're like, man, I wish I could change this. Like, I wish it could just be a little different.
Yeah.
Or maybe a lot different.
Yeah. I'd say my favorite part is going to new cities and playing my music for people in new cities. Like, my girlfriend Emma and I like talk about traveling all the time, and she loves it too. And I think my favorite thing to do is travel. But for me, like, when I think about like traveling and taking vacation time and doing all that kind of stuff, I kind of lean more towards like going on tour.
Really?
Mainly because like when I go on vacation, like I always just think, I'm like, oh, that would be cool.
Yeah.
To play there. Oh, wow. Like, or like, I'm like, I want to go see some live music. I don't know. That's just kind of like where my mind goes. So luckily I do have a vacation or two planned where I'm not doing that. But I think for touring, as far as that goes, it's experiencing new cities and experiencing music culture in new cities. Because I think that every city kind of has a little bit of like nuance to it. Like Lancaster is like an amazing music city that I think regularly goes unappreciated. You know, like it's easy to just pass through Pennsylvania and be like, all right, Philadelphia, Pittsburgh.
Yeah.
Cool. You know, but Lancaster like has a pretty thriving scene. And I'd say that that's the case for a lot of cities. But again, it kind of just depends. Like, so I'd say just going to new cities and seeing people's like instant reaction to like the music that they hear. Cause it's like finding a band for the first time.
Absolutely.
You know, sometimes like you're sitting there watching a band and you're like, okay, this is fine. Like, you know, I vibe with it. Their energy is cool, whatever. But sometimes you're sitting there just like jaw dropped. It's like, holy crap. And on the other side of that, like meeting those bands and playing with those bands on a bill is always really, really cool because like I feel like over the last like couple of years, I've met some of the coolest people and they just live in like, you know, Cleveland. You know, they live in Pittsburgh. They're throwing house shows in Pittsburgh. You know what I mean? Like, and those guys are just like throwing down like on a regular basis, like whether it's a house show or a record shop. And like once you like meet those people that are kind of doing the same thing as you, like in different cities, like it starts to create this really, really cool web that's kind of like all interwoven. Because then they're like, hey, we're going to Philly, like we need a Thursday show. Come to Lancaster. You know what I mean? Oh, we need a Sunday show on the way back. Oh, all right, like come through Lancaster, or like, you know, or we could at least set you up in the right direction. But I think the worst part of touring that I'd say, probably the drives. I mean, it really on the East Coast, it's not that bad. Okay. You know, like city to city, like I was saying before, the most you're going to do is 6 to 8 hours, which is not great, but it's a manageable drive, you know. And on the West Coast, like that's city to city. Gotcha. At least in like the East Coast, like you're traveling like 3 states over 8 hours, you know. So I'd say the driving or the sleeping situation sometimes. Luckily, like some of the more recent tours we've been going on, we have been like, you know, spending a little extra where we're getting Airbnbs. And I honestly think before COVID happened, like Airbnbs were way cheaper. Yeah, like realistically, like we only spent like I'd say under $1,000 staying at Airbnbs over the course of 2 weeks. Yeah. Which is insane. Now, like, you can't go to an Airbnb without the cleaning fee being $200. Yeah. Do you know what I mean? Yeah. So, and I think that probably just has to do with, like, some of the laws that changed. But I think making sure that we have somewhere good to sleep. That way, because, like, it's one thing when you're doing a long drive, and it's one thing when you don't have a good sleep. Yeah. It's another thing to do both those things in the same day and then go and play, you know? Yeah. So I think that's, like, the more... the daunting part. And for me, like, I get cranky when I don't sleep well. So like, I remember we were in Houston and I didn't want to eat it at first. So everyone went and got food and I was kind of just like, I'm just going to bum around, you know, I'm just going to like hang out in Houston, like I'm like walking around. I'm like, this place is pretty cool. Go grab a drink. And then like, show was probably about to start or I guess the show ended. It was an earlier show. So I was just like, oh shit, there's a pizza place right around the corner. I'm going to go grab a slice of pizza. So I'm like, I'm already hungry. I'm already getting a little cranky, you know, like, you know, you're feeling it, you're getting the hangries. I'm like walking around this corner. I go to this pizza shop, which is about to close. It's probably 15 minutes to close. And there's just a line out the door with everybody holding folding chairs. So folding chairs, what do you think of? Like now these are like folding chairs that they took from the event. What do you think it is?
It like hit you?
Like WWE.
Yeah.
WWE style. Yeah. So
there was a couple things that hit my mind because
what was the first thing?
The first thing was WWE. Yeah. But I didn't want to say it. And
no, like, WWE. Yeah. So all these people were in line for the pizza place from the WWE event, and they were all holding these chairs, and I was like, I'm not going in there. So then we're like, okay, let's go back home, and we got this dope Airbnb, had a hot tub, was like on like a gated complex of things, and all I could think about was like my next meal. Yeah. Like, and they're like, well, we're gonna go to the hot tub, and I'm like, I need some food. Like, so I'm like walking around now we're not even in downtown Houston. We're in like the suburbs of Houston, which we know how the city suburbs can go. Like one block, you're like, oh, this is kind of like a nice neighborhood. And the next block, you're like, this isn't so nice. Yeah. I'm literally like walking through the drive-through of like a Harvey's or some shit. Like, I was like, it was bad. I never got food. I literally just went back home and went to sleep. And that was like my lowest point on a tour. Because everyone was just like, yeah, we ate. We're feeling good. And I'm like, I don't want to go in the hot tub. I don't want to have to take a shower. Like, I don't want to have So I literally just like laid on the floor. I'm just like,
don't talk to me. Don't look at me. Don't
sleep. Like, woke up in the morning. I'm like, we need breakfast. And I will be fine. Like, I'm like, I just got to make it to breakfast. Yeah. But like moments like that where like, but again, like that just like adds up. Like I probably wouldn't have done that the first, like, you know, 4 or 5 days of tour, because I feel like, you know, like first 4 or 5 days of tour, like you will eat anything. But then like once you kind of like start to like feel a little crappier, you're like, I just like, I want something specific. Like
Yeah.
in the moment I was just like pizza, that's a quick fix.
Mhm.
And then I was just like, now I'm taking any fast food.
Yeah.
Now we're like, let's find a dope breakfast place so I can actually like sustain myself for a couple hours.
Jeez. Yeah. The preparation that you have to put into, before performing, let alone the preparation going on tour. I want to kind of shift gears to that performance now.
Mm-hmm.
When you're playing in a venue, whether it's new to you or you've been there before, been there plenty of times, how do you feel like those moments leading up to it? Nervous? Are you anxious? Like excited? Like, are you like, let's fucking go?
Yeah. It's honestly, it's more like that. It's like kind of like the anxiety of the anticipation. Like we always say, like, no matter where we are in the bill, like I'll just sit outside and be like, I just want to play.
Yeah.
Like, I just want to play.
That's awesome.
Like, just let me at it.
That's
like, you know what I mean? Like, you're just like ready to go.
Yeah.
Like almost like a horse, like ready to like run. Just in the stable, just like, you know? Like I don't know. Like that's how I feel like like a football player before a game, just like I just want to hit somebody. Yeah. Like, you know, that's kind of how I feel. And I think like there are definitely moments where I've only noticed like nerves is when I'm setting up, mainly because like my hands just like tend to just shake a little bit. Like I'm just like, okay, because I'm more so, because a lot of times, at least from a drumming perspective, you're playing on somebody else's kit, you know? So like for me, like it's like that moment that like there's like maybe like a 5 to 10 minute window where I'm sitting behind the kit. Like I'm just like setting up my stuff and I'm like, okay, well, what do I like? What do I need? Do I need anything from the car? Because most often I have everything with me, but it's about like what I brought to the venue. So I'm like, okay, like what do I need to do? Like, what's this going on right here? How do I adjust this? Like that kind of moment makes me a little bit nervous, because like I'll definitely kick into the first song and be like, whoop, that floor tom's way too far away. Okay. You know what I mean? Like, or like, you know, you're playing and like the floor tom shifts down and you're like, I guess I'm not using that for the rest of the song. Like things like that, where I'm just like, I'm trying to make sure that doesn't happen. But other than that, it's more so like that, just excitement. I'm just like, yo, let me sink my teeth into it. Let's do it. Yeah.
See, I get anxiety. And my anxiety doesn't go with me, like, so with doing the podcast, doing an interview, it doesn't go with the actual interview part that I get anxiety with. It's that my equipment won't work, which and that is my, and like that's what, like I'm like, am I gonna have to say all this shit all over again?
Yeah, I'm gonna have to capture the same moment.
Yeah.
It's like,
but so like beforehand, I do get a little bit of anxiety, and that's just one-on-one conversations, things like that. I think about getting up on a stage, on a platform, on whatever it may be, where you're about to perform, and my hands start to sweat. But that is because, one, I suck at that stuff. Like, so I would like to, my friends have tried to get me to stand up to do karaoke at bars. Nah, I won't touch it. I won't, open mic night. No, I won't touch it, just because I'm not confident in myself. So the fact that you're like, I'm ready to do this, I'm like, let's go, that kind of shows like someone like me, hey, all right, he's got some confidence with it. That means you actually believe in yourself, that, all right, if I can get going, I know it's going to be good.
Yeah, so. Yeah. And I feel like, I mean, you probably had moments like this too, where this happens more so for like, you know, people that I sit in with, you know, like I play with a guy named Tuck Ryan a good bit, and I play with another guy named Jordan Rast, like, and just like these solo artists. And sometimes like you're sitting behind the kit and you're like getting set up and you're like, that's probably more nerve-wracking for me, because sometimes like we don't know the set. Yeah, sometimes they're just calling songs and you're just vibing, which again, like, is a completely different beast, but makes you such a better musician. But I always tell myself, like, if I ever like, you know, doubt or just have any hints of doubt, like, it's just like, I wouldn't be put in this situation if I wasn't meant to be here. Yeah. And you know, that sounds like kind of like, you know, like a little bit almost like, well, I guess maybe a little egotistical, but in my mind, I'm like, I have to tell myself, I'm like, I'm meant to be in this moment. You know what I mean? Because like, I'm sitting behind the drum set, I'm like, well, no one else is playing drums here. Do you know what I mean? Like, I'm meant to be here. And I feel like that's kind of just been something that's helped me in the process. You know, like the next time you go to do karaoke, to say like, I'm meant to be here. Karaoke champ. Yeah, and in the moment, you just tell yourself, you're like, I'm meant to be here. I'm meant to do this. Yeah. Greg Allman song, like, you know what I mean? Like, Yeah. Yeah, exactly. Liquid courage.
I'll tell you what, every time I get up there, I'm like, all right, I'll do a song that like is meaningful to me, and somehow, some way, I end up singing a Backstreet Boys song. Like, just
What are you saying? They don't have meanings?
no, they do, but like every time it's Backstreet's Back because it's the simplest,
and everyone's gonna be about
yeah. So no, I just like I'm still just taken away by like the whole being able to get up on stage and perform. That blows my mind to where uh, I have no words for it. Yeah, I wanted to also ask you, and how much time do we have? Okay. If you're wondering who I'm talking to, that's Michaela behind the camera. Uh, I wanted to ask you also. So you talked a little bit about your girlfriend, Emma, correct? Yeah. So when you guys go on tour, does she go with you, or?
I've offered it to her. She hasn't taken me up on it yet. Okay. We've done me and her have like done like acoustic weekenders together. Like my friend and I, Tim Lupia, did like a little weekend run out to Pittsburgh, and she came with us for that.
Okay.
But yeah, she hasn't been on any long tours with me. I do want to plan something, but it's almost like especially when you add another person, like you do have to kind of take that into account.
Yeah.
You know, like when we went on our long tour, we brought our friend Ariel along with us, and she helped us book the tour. So it made sense for her to come, you know, run some of the merch tables, like take pictures and all that kind of stuff. Especially like if you're like a 3 or 4 piece and you can add another person, like to do that kind of stuff. Like you were talking about content earlier, like just anything and everything that you can post or like have someone running the merch table while you're up there. So that's like a big thing, but I think that if she was to come on tour, I think she would, but it would be a matter of her getting off and her also like having a role too. Like I think that she would be amazing doing that, like whether it be like helping us like reach out to venues and kind of get in contact with people, or like just be the liaison to kind of do that. Like she's awesome with that kind of stuff. But I think that it would definitely be a little bit more planning, because then you also, going on tour with 3 dudes is definitely different than going on tour with 3 dudes. And exactly. Like it can be a little like we can definitely tolerate a lot more stank than women can. And also what I've noticed is like, and this is just kind of across the board, like guys will literally throw on, or they'll just sleep in the clothes that they slept in and then just roll in the car. While women, like it does take them a little bit more time to like get themselves together, which I appreciate. So, and also I don't envy. So
why does it take you women so long to get? No, I'm just kidding.
No, well, that's because like I can roll out of bed at 9:45 and tell you that I was going to be here at 10, tell you I'm running a little late, and still look presentable. While if I was a woman, it would have taken me a little bit longer, because I definitely would have had to shower today. That's what I'm saying. And again, I just think that there's a lot more of a process that goes into it, and I feel like also guys don't care how we look. We'll walk out of the house with a wrinkled shirt. Like no dig. But I'm saying we're probably both a little bit more wrinkly than Michaela is.
No, I'm right with you. There's a way that guys handle their situation, their day-to-day lives versus so I completely get that. So when you're touring without her, what, like, is there struggles with that? Is like, obviously she's probably very supportive of what you do. But like, what's some of the difficulties of traveling without her, or what's some of the like positive sides of it?
So I think the difficulties for me is making sure to reach out and make sure that I'm still making that contact, because like we'll be texting the whole time, but making sure that I take time to like do a FaceTime call or a phone call makes all the difference.
Absolutely.
And I think for her it definitely sucks a lot worse, because like I'm out there having a good time, texting and be like
Yeah.
But I think that just making sure that you're still like, reaching out and making that contact is really the thing that kind of makes it a little bit more manageable. But I will say, like, so we have a trip in June to plan to the UK actually, and we're going to visit her family. Her family's from England.
Oh, nice.
So that's like one of our vacations that yeah. So we're going there in June, which is going to be awesome. But we planned that whole thing out, and I was just like, we were talking about possibly like moving it into a new apartment and all that kind of stuff. And I pretty much told her, I'm like, well, we can't do it over the summer. She's like, well, why can't we do it over the summer? I'm like, well, I'm going on tour. And she's like, oh, well, I know the one in July. And I'm like, yeah, there's one in August too. She's like,
oh, geez.
Yeah. Again, and that's also like the downside of planning so far in advance is like I'm working on all this stuff, and honestly, like I will say I do tend to get a little caught up in like the emails and stuff like that, especially when I'm home and like we're like just like watching like whatever on Netflix. Like I'll be like doing stuff because like it is kind of like it's not just like 40 hours 9 to 5. It's like 40 hours over the course of all that. So I'm definitely learning, but we've been together for almost 7 years now.
Wow,
so
that's awesome.
So it's definitely like it's still a learning process of like what makes it easier for her when I'm away, and then also like just like the things that I can do to like just keep our relationship strong. But I think you can attest to this as well. Like when like distance does make the heart grow fonder. Our first year of our relationship, we were about 6 hours apart. So you know what I mean. Okay. So like right off the bat, we were kind of separated. So I feel like just kind of having that like that distance like makes it a little bit more enjoyable when you do have the time together. And again, like I said, like it's not even like even when I'm out on tour or just like around, like it's just one of those things where it's easy to like go and stay and practice later, and it's like that mental like switch of being like, okay, I got to get home. Absolutely. Like, I got stuff going on this weekend. I got to get home and make that time. And I'm getting better, but I will admit that I'm not as good as I should be.
At least you see, I know for a fact that Adriana, if I was getting ready to go on tour, go ahead. She'd pack my bag. She'd probably throw it all in the van. Go ahead, take them. As long as you want. Go ahead, get on out. Kick. So.
But as soon as you're out on the road, she's like,
she's hold on, wait. I have to watch Grayson all by myself.
All by myself? Yeah.
So what time? Okay. So, we're going to take a brief break, and, when we come back, get more into who is Cory, right? And what is just kind of, what is Cory and how is Cory? No. But we'll kind of just dive into more you and your interests, things like that. So cool. We're going to take a brief break, and we will be right back after this. And we are back with, it's now going to be the closing segment, I like to call it. But I wanted to talk about this week's Spotlight TWS for this episode, which is obviously going to be your bands, Northern Gloom and Sun Not Yellow, because you're touring, you have albums, things like that. You have a bunch of releases coming out. So I'm going to kind of leave the stage open to you because you and your bands are this week's Spotlight. Go ahead. You have the floor.
Yeah. So the first band that's releasing a record this summer is Northern Gloom. we're a post-punk band from Central PA, and I guess like the best way to describe it is kind of like this like 80s punk vibe. And with that band specifically, like I think that band came along at like a perfect time in my life. You know, right when I started getting into a lot of 80s music. They basically Brian and I were teaching together, and he just showed me these demos of him and his college friend just making music, and I was like, man, these songs slap, dude. Like these songs are amazing. And he's like, yeah, he's like, we want to play out, but we just don't have a bass player. And I'm not even kidding you. Like I had played bass like for most of my musical life up to that point, but I just at that time bought a new bass to be like, yeah, I'm gonna like just like really start like, you know, dialing in my bass a little bit. Maybe I can like, you know, play some gigs, because in Lancaster there just like aren't like there are plenty of amazing bass players, but there's always room for more. So I was like, yeah, it would be really, really cool to be a competent bass player. And then this band kind of fell into my lap. It was like the perfect music for what I was listening to at the time, and then it's kind of just been a roller coaster ever since then. So at first we got together and learned all the songs that they had written, and I think within 4 months we tracked the whole record.
No way.
So yeah, it happened really, really quickly, and we kind of dragged our feet on releasing the record mainly because we wanted to get vinyl, and by the time we got vinyl, we were kind of in the midst of the pandemic.
Mm-hmm.
So it kind of ended up like that record actually only came out last summer, but we had that record recorded for almost like a year. Wow. And actually the same thing is happening with this new record that we've put out, or we're going to put out in July. It's called Here It Is.
Okay.
And the concept for this record was actually like basically like an airplane taking off, and the journey that you have as you're like, you know, taking off into like a new adventure, and then kind of like observing everything around you at like almost from above as you kind of like, you know, take part in this new kind of endeavor. So we kind of like wrote the whole album with that concept. We found this old school jazz record that had like this, it was a bossa nova record. It was it had a plane on it, and it had like all this like Spanish writing, and we're just like, that album cover is freaking amazing. So we literally just like took that same idea and wrote a whole album around it. Yeah. So and just like I said for the first record, we recorded this probably, I guess we recorded this not this past February, but the February before. I can't remember. We got snowed in. It was one of those snows over the pandemic that kind of like we were literally in the studio for 3 or 4 days and we couldn't leave.
Oh wow!
We recorded for like 2 days, and then we're like, oh, it's snowing out, whatever. and then we tried to go like get food or something like that, and we couldn't even get out. And we're like, oh man. Yeah. So we recorded at this place called Noisy Little Critter, which is an awesome studio that I work out of, and I did my internship out of in Westchester with this guy named Mike Bardzik, who tracked and mixed the whole record for us, and he killed it. So we're releasing that record in July, and then we're going on tour for it. So the main thing that we were kind of worried about was, you know, getting vinyl. That's always like kind of the holdup with a lot of releases nowadays, is because like some vinyl places they just don't like turn it around as quickly. But luckily we went and we got the record made, and it came back really, really quickly. So we actually have all the vinyl, everything's like awesome. Done. That's fantastic. So I actually have it in the other room. I can go grab one and show it to you. But so we recorded, pressed that, and kind of have everything ready to go. And we actually just signed a distribution deal with Epictronic. So yeah, I don't really know too much about like what all is involved in well, actually I do now, but when we originally got the offer, I didn't know too much about what it was. It's not like a record deal or anything. It's basically like a company is going to help us push the record, which is really, really cool. And we didn't have to like sign away too many of our like rights to it. We basically just had to sign away like the actual sound recordings, because basically how it works is like there's the recordings, and then there's the actual content of the song itself, like the lyrics and the chord progressions and stuff. So that's going to be really, really cool, because it's the first time that we're actually like pushing a record with another entity. Yeah. So and then in, I guess it's mid-July, we're going on tour. So we're hitting Pittsburgh, Cleveland, Chicago. We're doing 2 nights in Nashville. We're doing Memphis and a couple other places along the way. But yes, if you like 80s post-punk, if you like any bands like Killing Joke, The Cure, or Joy Division, we're definitely up your alley.
That's awesome.
And and we're playing in Lancaster in July as well, on July 29th, which is going to be our album release show. So and May 27th. But I don't know if this podcast is going to be released before then. Yeah. So we're doing our release show at Tellus with Kalima and the Garland of Arms and this other band called Faux Fear, which they're both Pennsylvania bands. Kalima is from Scranton area, and then Faux Fear's from Reading.
Okay.
And they actually, that band like throws house shows at this place called Cloud 10, which I just want to give them a shout out because they've had Northern Gloom a couple times and it's always a good time out there. So yeah, I'm really stoked on that band. I just got a new amp for it. So I specifically got a bass a few months ago for it. Like, so we recorded this whole album and I had my P bass and there's another, it's pretty much not a guild. It's a GNL. It's a GNL bass and they had it at the studio and I used it for most of the record. And I was just like, God damn. I was like, if I'm going to play this record out, I got to get this bass.
Yeah.
So, luckily right before my friend left Guitar Center, I got a new bass. So,
nice.
And then I got a new bass amp. So I'm ready to go with, that 80s post-punk sound.
Awesome.
So yeah, I'm pretty stoked on that.
That's fantastic.
Yeah.
So, and then you also have Sun Night Yellow, which you're also touring for.
Yep.
And you also have releases for. So.
Yeah. So that band, Sun Night Yellow, we've pretty much been working on this album the entire pandemic.
Wow.
I feel like with the Northern Gloom stuff, we had the songs kind of like pretty much, we were fleshing the songs out over top of the pandemic. While Sun Night Yellow, we've actually been writing and recording the whole time.
Okay.
So Northern Gloom, we pretty much like wrote the songs and then went and recorded it. Sun Night Yellow has been like, oh, let's write this song. Okay, yeah, that sounds pretty good. Let's demo this. Okay, cool, that sounds pretty good. All right, well, let's like get a day where we're tracking. So we basically like tracked like the whole album in like bits and pieces,
Gotcha.
like basically like batches of songs, which has been a little bit of a different process. And we actually a lot of times like with that band, like usually you have one person that writes the lyrics and all that kind of stuff. But with Sun Night Yellow, specifically with the last EP we released, Howard, Ohio, we wrote all the lyrics together, which is, fun.
Yeah.
Definitely takes a lot longer because it's like, this is what I'm thinking for the lyrical content. And then like, what about this line? And you're like, oh, that's a pretty cool line, but what if we say it this way? And then you can go down so many different rabbit holes. Yeah. But with this record, we pretty much we had the whole album, but just music. We didn't have any lyrics. And the guitar player, Jesse, actually had a lot of like concepts that he wanted to talk about for each individual song, but we didn't really have too many lyrics as far as that went. So over the last couple months, it's been like basically finishing up the record. So whether that's like adding tambourine, adding, like backing vocals and all that kind of stuff, and writing the lyrics. So like there were points where we were like a couple like month or two ago where we're literally sitting in this room that we're in right now and we're like sitting there just like, so what do we do? And Jesse's like, well, this is kind of the melody I'm thinking. I'm like he's like, down, bump it down. Bump. I'm like, okay, all right. So like, we're going to go that way. I'm like, what if we like, he's like, the second verse, I want to go a little faster. I'm like, well, so it's a lot of like, at least with that band, it's a lot of creative minutia where we're kind of just like, let's try this. That doesn't work. Let's cut that. Like, okay, let's try this. Like, that's not working. Oh, what about this part? Like I feel like this whole album is just like, it's basically to me like our most like honed in sound because we played in bands together like for years, and this band definitely feels like we just try to be as experimental as we can. Mainly because it's the three of us who've been playing together for as long as we can. Like Jesse and Caden and I have been playing since I was 18.
Wow. Okay.
So it's almost been like 10 years of playing together and like different variations of projects. But this, like, when you listen to like our first EP that we put out, and it's super sporadic. Like, we were basically like, okay, cool, sweet verse, cool chorus. What is this? Like a part we never come back to. Like, you know what I mean? Like we would just do like these little sections of like just like random stuff, like almost just like riffs that we had. And I feel like that's kind of been a common theme for Sun Night Yellow. Basically, like, we don't have like verses and choruses. We have like parts. And like the thing that I think is a chorus is like what Jesse considers a verse. And I'm like, let's not even label them. Like, let's just call them the parts or whatever. Yeah. So, but with this album, it definitely feels like all of those sections kind of like came together really, really naturally and really, really easily. And now, like, we're literally going back and relearning these songs.
Wow.
Like, currently, like, the last two practices is us like revisiting these songs and being like, oh yeah, that part. Okay, let's just rep that part real quick. Like, yeah. Oh man, I forgot we even did that part. Wow. Like, we like listen to the recordings, we're like, oh yeah, cool. Because we were basically like just writing these songs in like parts. Like, we'd be like really like into this one song for like a couple weeks and we'd move on to the next one. So it was definitely like a different writing process, but it definitely kind of helped to kind of go in with a concept. So the album with that we're about to release in August is called A Hip New Hell.
Okay.
And basically the concept is kind of about to me kind of observing all of like the almost like I want to say like political, not necessarily like in politics, but just like how people kind of like associate what they associate with where they stand on certain situations.
Yeah.
Like, oh, this happens. Like, where do you stand?
Yeah.
Like, do you agree? Do you disagree with how certain entities took care of that situation? So it's basically, to me, it seems like a lot of like that, where it's almost like embracing the situations that you're in right now. Like in my mind, like, I grew up pretty religious in a religious household, but I can say that right now my being is a little bit more spiritual, but it's almost like kind of accepting the fact that like this could be hell. Like this, we could be living in hell right now. You know what I mean? Like we don't really know what this is. We don't really know what's to come, but it's kind of like embracing like the moments that you're having right now. And it was funny because like some of the lyrics that like Jesse and that we fleshed out in the beginning were very almost political. It was turmoil. Like there were like the the George Floyd situation. Like there were situations in Lancaster with the cops, like kind of like taking advantage of like just like situations that were happening downtown and all that kind of stuff. I remember like helicopters like flying over Lancaster, like with like the police helicopters and stuff. And like while we weren't directly impacted by that because of like we were just at home watching and observing. It's kind of one of those things where it's like you have to still take into account and formulate your opinions. You have to stand steady with like where you kind of fall along those lines. And I mean, for 20-something-year-olds and 30-something-year-olds, we're in this weird purgatory state where like people in power are not anywhere near our age range. So it's like, oh well, like sure, like this politician says that he's for us or whatever, but he's also old as hell. You know what I mean? Where's the line and where's that like kind of disconnect? And I don't really think that the album itself is political, but I think that I think it kind of plays off of the situations where we were forced to kind of like make opinions and not just be neutral at hand. So I think that to me is kind of what I've gotten out of the record. But and we're going on tour in August. So the goal is for Northern Gloom, our concept was we're gonna tour and then release the record. For Sun Not Yellow, it's the opposite. We're gonna release the record and go. Mainly because we don't really have any physical distribution. Like we want vinyl, but we just don't really want to do it before the record, and we don't really. We'll have CDs and stuff, but like who buys CDs? Please buy CDs. Like I don't know. Even if you don't have CD players in your car, just buy the CDs. And so we're trying to kind of mess around with different ways of promotion, as far as like linking people to the website or making a website where people can kind of go to kind of like links to whatever platform they want. That way it's like here and then there. And then the other thing is just kind of like creating, with Sun Not Yellow specifically, Northern Gloom kind of naturally does this because of how Michael kind of works. He's always videotaping, he's always recording, he's always doing stuff like that. So the content comes a little bit easier with that band. But with Sun Not Yellow, it's been like scheduling content sessions where we're like, okay, we're coming in and we're doing pictures. Actually, the guy, Michael Stipe from Northern Gloom, is the one that does all the pictures. Oh, nice. He's like, you want me to help? I'm like, yes, please. Like, so he's got a green screen. We've been doing like green screen stuff. Awesome. And basically like over the last like couple months has been like finishing the record while also like making content and getting stuff for that. Because if I've learned anything, it's like we said earlier, it's preparing for the future. It's being like out on the road and being like, okay, I have a Dropbox folder of just pictures to post. You know what I mean? Because like we can do like, like that one of those, or like set up like a camera with a tripod, and we'll do that too sometimes. But it's really about just having content to post and to actually like mess with too. Like Jesse's really good with like adding like visuals and like kind of like messing with like photo editing and stuff like that. So the idea was like we're just going to take a ton of photos and then he's just going to mess with it, and we'll like, have like stuff for like Instagram reels, maybe some YouTube stuff. So really with this album, it's going to be the first time where we we've done a concept album before, but this is going to be the first time where we're really like gearing the content around the album and ideas
That's
around
awesome.
the album too. So I'm really stoked for that. So yeah, we'll be going on tour in August, and then I'm pretty sure the Sun Not Yellow release show for Lancaster will be August 18th.
Okay.
At Phantom Power.
Okay.
I'm pretty sure that's the date. If I'm not mistaken, we were talking to Shannon and Greg about it, and they threw a couple Thursdays. We wanted to do a Thursday show because I feel like it's easy to have multiple things going on the weekend in Lancaster, and as we know, like Lancaster's a great scene, but like if you have like one or two shows, even 3 shows in the same night, you're splitting that crowd up. So we wanted to do a Thursday show, but Phantom Power is freaking awesome. They're in Millersville, so a little further outside the city, but Greg and Shannon are doing a great job with that venue. Have you ever been there before?
No, I have not.
Oh, dude,
yeah, I'm gonna
highly recommend it.
I'll have to definitely come to one.
Now you have to.
Yeah, I have to for sure. And you said May 27th you're going to be Tellus?
Next Friday, May 27th.
Okay. I'm going to try to make that one. Yeah.
So you have a reason to go. Yeah. Well, you also have a reason not to go because you have a child. Yeah. And then the release show for Northern Gloom is July 29th.
Okay.
Friday, July 29th. So that one's going to be epic as hell. So is the May 27th one. May 27th we're with Nick Cove and the Wandering and Jake Joyce and his band. So it's going to be a really, really good show. And Friday night in Lancaster, you can't beat it.
Yeah. So needless to say, busy summer.
Busy summer. Yeah.
So then Northern Gloom, touring July,
playing bass,
and then
the damn thing,
releasing album afterwards.
Yep.
And then Sun Not Yellow touring in August.
Yep, and releasing the album right when we start touring.
Awesome. That's fantastic. I wanted to quickly this was on the back of my mind. You said earlier, before we end the podcast, that sometimes you feel like you're in the right moment. You're in that for a reason.
Mm-hmm.
Whether it's someone who's religious, whether it's someone who's spiritual, whether it's someone who just believes it's the wind pushing you in that area. I'm a heavy believer that where you are in each moment is where you're meant to be.
Mm-hmm.
The decisions that you make push you to where you need to go.
Yeah.
So, and I think the decisions that you made have gotten you to this point. And I mean, you've gained a fan from myself. And hopefully you've gained many other fans that watch and listen. But more importantly, just take pride. And if there's anything I can say, take pride in what you're doing, because you're making an impact, for one. And two, it's working. What you're doing, your sound, your ability to play these instruments and to perform the way that you do. You should definitely be proud of yourself for getting to this point and to hopefully continue it further. So,
thank you, man. I appreciate that.
Yeah, of course. Yeah. So I really do appreciate you coming on and allowing us to be in your, this is not the Gray Studio, so let's not get that confused whatsoever.
Got some gray walls over there.
Yeah. No, thanks for having us here, and thank you for allowing us to sit down and chit-chat, and I'd love to have you back on the podcast.
Dude, yeah, for sure. Same goes for you.
Yeah.
I've listened to a couple of the podcasts before getting on, and you're a great conversator.
Oh, thank you. Appreciate it. Yeah, I'm trying to learn something. So.
No, dude, it's fun. Because like you said, once we got rolling,
it's just easy. It's just conversation. Yeah.
Well, I can't believe we've actually been talking for this long.
Yeah. I'm going to try to make it out to your show Friday.
Sweet.
And if Tellus lets me record, I don't know what their record policy is.
You can you can record on your phone.
Maybe record a little bit for you. And use it as like a follow-up segment as, hey, look, this is how the show went.
Yeah, most definitely.
Make sure to check you guys out. So again, thank you so much for everything, and good luck with your tours, with your releases, and
thanks.
And make sure, if you haven't already, you got to check out Cory. We're going to leave his Instagram information down below. We're also going to link Northern Gloom, and you have a website with them for the tour?
Yeah. We have a website and an Instagram.
Okay.
And then same with Sun Not Yellow.
Okay, so we're going to link both of them because of their releases.
Yeah,
and
for sure,
things
for
like
sure.
that. So make sure to check out Cory and all the bands that he's associated with. And for more content like this, make sure to check out the Great Podcast going forward. Hoping to bring you content just like this with very interesting people just like Cory. So thank you for listening, thank you for watching, and have a good day.